So I think we're going to see come back to like these levels. And I think what you're going to see in inverse of the QQQ going down, I think you're going to see Queb go up. And so I think you're going to have a buy the China ETF play that's going to happen into May. And I think it's going to be a sell-off in the broader market. So this is like basically my chart. You can see here, there's a flagpole, flag up, comes down. It's going to repeat another cycle of a wave that we should target somewhere between 29 and 30 by May. If this actually does inverse the QQQ. The other thing I'm watching is ARC, which is the innovation, with Cathie Wood and their ETF. There seems to be support somewhere in the 46 area. So obviously, despite there's a pullback this morning, but what I'm watching here is a flag to develop here. So if that's going to be true, we move up support, it needs to hold somewhere over here. So if you look at that, I'm kind of anticipating something along the lines of a bounce to happen again at the previous support level. This used to be marked as a resistance level. It gained support somewhere around the beginning of this year. I'm looking for it to hopefully hold support. If you look at previous declines in this one, let's see. Look at a range here. So if you look at previous period of what used to be, this is how I'm measuring it kind of. So I'm basically drawing a previous circle here. I'm looking at previous period, which similarly lines up. And then I'm looking at essentially a flagpole measured at the tip here, outward. And basically what I'm doing is I'm anticipating something like this, which lines up with what I previously put in here. And so you're going to have, if I go to the daily, you're going to have, basically hopefully another cycle or sequence as we move into the summer with growth. Now, if the floor breaks down on this and 46 is lost, then I'm going to have to reconsider where the next leg is, which I think is somewhere between 44 or it's going to be 40. If it goes that low, I mean, this sequence is kind of invalidated. But if you look at Coin's chart, which is the ARC leader, I mean, this ARC is obviously way behind what Coin did. But if you look here, Coin kind of did a very similar sequence. It kind of went up, it did another up leg, and then it did a very large up leg to match the previous. I mean, this is all Wyckoff accumulation if you look it up. But you can see here, previous tranche, and then it makes it back up to the previous tranche here. So there's basically levels that are happening here. And that's where if you go back to ARC, it's behind Coin. And so I'm anticipating making it up to this tranche area. And then lastly, up into the 90 area. So ideally, it's going to do something like this. It's going to come and settle. And then maybe by December, it gets up into that 90 area. I do think China and I do think ARC names, also bio names are interesting right now, which I posted in the group. So if you look at Moderna, you're seeing a bit of an inverse head and shoulders develop here. You can see, here's the left shoulder, here's the head, here's the right shoulder. I anticipate this one to make it somewhere up into the 200 area. Could happen in the summer, it could happen in the fall, but I do anticipate this becoming in play again. So if you look at previous, and then you were to basically flip it out, and you wanted to be safe, I'd take October. I'd probably take like the 120 strike calls and try to play the upside in this channel. But if you can see kind of what I'm doing here is basically if you were to replicate what kind of is happening here and mirror it, you're going to have some sort of channel play for the next 6 months. The other one is interesting is Pfizer. It's got it basically has been beaten down for, I don't even know how long now. It's been beaten down for a year. And so it's kind of developing some accumulation down here. You can see, you had a bit of you could try to mark it into like a descending channel here, which if you look here, it's basically tapping on the exit to get out of here. I think if you look at previous, obviously if you dial this back into the 2020 area, when it got into this area it is now, it rocketed to 37. Not to say that that's going to happen again, but what I do think could happen is something like this to be safe. So if you carry that out and you dragged it out long, you're looking at, by January, could this get up into the 35, 40 area? It's possible. So I would try to play, you could either go like, December 27, 30 call area and play the upside. You could buy commons. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can play this, but the general rule in this market is try to be safe. Again, if you go to like some of the other names I posted, like Snow, obviously crushed in pre-market here. It's down considerably. I do think overall it's forming a base here. If it can hold, it has to hold 150 area. So if it can hold this 150 area, I do think it has the opportunity. I mean, previously when it got to 150, this thing rocketed to 240 within a short time frame. I do think it has the ability to kind of regain its footings here and close this gap upward in the 200 area by June, July. If it loses it, it's got to catch support somewhere at the 140 area or the 120 area. Hopefully it doesn't lose support and we can see some upside continuation on this. Same thing with Zoom. Zoom is one, obviously pre-market's not what we want to see here. It's coming right back down to this area it's been playing in for the last week or so. I'm hoping what happens here is it catches some bids down here again. And then we see this move up into May in the 70 or 75 area. And basically, I'm assuming it's going to get rejected at 75. It's going to come and consolidate, bounce again, and then hopefully it moves into the summertime, which aligns with ARK moving up to the next level. And it closes these gaps. And then later, as you can see, as we move into October, November area, I think Zoom can get up into the 120 area if we can see this pattern play out. This is a Wyckoff accumulation. So if you look at it, it kind of rejects here twice, comes down, builds basically the spring area, and then now we're in this basically LP2 phase to come off and regain some steam. It needs to hold for this to be valid. It needs to hold 61.55. If it loses the floor here and it breaks into the low 60s, this pattern becomes invalidated and we'll have to relook at what happens next. The other one that caught my interest was Neo. Pre-market, obviously it's down again, but we had, this stock's just been clobbered. If you look at previous history of this, I mean, it gets clobbered, it comes way down, it builds a little accumulation, which you can see here. It's kind of bottomed out, and then it has a little stride run. It kind of got the same kind of retrospect, got clobbered. So basically what I drew is the top of the peak here to the bottom where it got clobbered. We're going to replicate it. You can kind of see it's almost aligned, top of the peak here to the bottom. So is it time for it to kind of make its way up into a May, June run to 9, 10 area? Possible. I think we really got to watch here, but I'm playing, basically I got the May 5 calls. They're like 29 cents. I'm looking for this to regain its footing somewhere up into the $7 price range by May, which would put it in line with earnings, which is, I think around, end of May. So maybe there's a run up here to earnings and then it'll have, consolidation period. But I think Neo is interesting. I mean, $4.50 seems pretty cheap. If you look at where this thing was at its peak, 63.45. You see a lot of stocks too. I mean, they're following this kind of pattern. They build levels and then they worked its way all the way back down into the previous. This is pretty strong support. I mean, if Neo loses 450 and goes down past sub 4, I will probably just not even play it anymore. Another one that I like is Roku. This one is, as I mentioned, with ARK rotation. This one's interesting. Pre-market, again, everything's down, but $60 area. It needs to hold this little accumulation spot. I anticipate it to hold it based on previous. It held it a few times here. So this is pretty good strength down here in the 56-60 area. What I'm hoping happens here is we see a bit of consolidation and then a pop. They could kill calls today and get premiums down for next week or towards the end of the month. And so what I think might happen here is an opportunity to basically buy end of month or into May and look for this gap to close. So to be safe, you could go like May 17th area, and you could try to play the gap closing on the upward, which is in the 81 to 86 range. Or to be even safer, you could play this mini gap here, which is in the 70 area. I still would stick to calls like the 60 area strike. I like to go as low as possible, as close to the strike point to play upside versus trying to go way out of the money. But really the big ones I'm watching this pre-market as we open here is going to be ARK. So looking at what ARK does, obviously right now it's hanging on by a thread at 46.87 in pre-market. I mean, you got the leading names that it holds. You got Tesla, which had obviously some strength. That's showing some weakness, but still strong up here in pre-market. And then you got Queb, so the China ETF. I mean, it's still, despite obviously selling off the gap up it had early on today, I mean, it's still showing strength here, building in that flag. It still remains in the flag. And then I think you can look at, within ARK, what are the names that are starting to pop up? So Teladoc, you're starting to see some strength finally breaking out down here. It's starting to accumulate. You have Unity, which I posted in here too. Unity starting to, despite being down in this range for a bit now, it's starting to make its turn based on what you're seeing here with, the RSIs coming up. You got the stochastic curling as well. And then you have Roku, and then you have Zoom. So I'm anticipating ARK to start to do some rotational buying here. They had heavy coin, they had heavy hood. If you look at where those went, those already ran. And so I think, you're down here. Like if you look at the hood chart, Unity's down here in this area. So hood's, at that next level. If you look at, like I mentioned, coin, you look at Tesla, you look at some of these names. I mean, that's why ARK's selling off coin is because it's already kind of done its thing here, right? So, it's basically built these levels. It's 2-3 sequences ahead of a lot of these. And then you have like Square, which it owns heavily, which Square as well. It did its bottom bounce. It's kind of up here waiting for its next leg to move up. So, you're seeing a bit of rotational buying that's occurring within a lot of these ETFs to keep obviously some stabilization in the market. The other one everyone's talking about on social media is PayPal. And this is the last one that kind of caught my interest. It's, down significantly in pre-market. It's coming again to challenge the 65 area once again. The key today is to watch the volume. You have this thing, it was at a breakout point yesterday, moving. I think what's going to happen is it's going to need more time. I think this is going to be a May play to close that gap. And so it's going to kind of dance down here. It's going to play. It's going to then curl back up. And then it's going to go for that gap close. You can see a lot of squiggly scenario plays down here. I do hope that 65 holds or that 63 area. If these break, PayPal is going to come down again to challenge the low, 57 area. But I do think that this little squiggly pattern that I drew here does play out. I just think it needs a little bit more time. So you can see like it needs to close this gap upward, which is, the volume is all sitting here at the shelf at 65. 74 area is really where I'm expecting this to kind of close that gap. Does anyone want me to chart a few real quick? Which one, BA? Yeah, I mean Boeing, Boeing along with, a lot of names right now got crushed. I mean, it's down pre-market. I mean, if you look at the daily here, I mean, it is at an interesting level down here. Support really, I mean, it's got to hold. I can bring this back down to here. It's got to hold this level. Previous bounce point. I mean, I think you could get a play off of this as long as it holds. I think it's going to take time though. I mean, you're looking at potentially a revisit by summer in the 200s, and that, would be super optimistic. I think if you're going to play it, I think you go, 180 calls. I'd probably go June or July, try to collect the upside. if this floor breaks at 174, I mean, you could probably see this thing come down to the 150s again or lower. But it obviously, this is a pretty solid support. I mean, this thing challenged this 2020, challenged it again in 2022. I would be pretty surprised if it did break all the way down there again. If you go to the weekly, I mean, this thing's pretty floored. I mean, the stochastics bottomed, RSI's bottomed. I think you could say that 170, that area is pretty strong. The only reason I say that is previously the stochastic floored, this was at 120s. Now it's floored and it's at 170. So I think you got some strength here. I mean, Boeing, I would say this is a, head. Here's the long left shoulder, long right shoulder. Eventually, I do think Boeing regains itself. And it's like with a lot of these cyclicals, like I think late 2020, 25, it regains its footing, travels hot. I mean, if you look at the Jets ETF is another one I would check out. Like if you're looking to play airlines, which you can see it's building. There's obviously an RSI building above 50 on the weekly. It's starting to build here. I do think this has a breakout opportunity into late 2025, which would be airlines, which if you look at some of these airline names like Delta, you can see here again, strengths building in the RSI and the stochastic. It's playing now, it's up challenging again, this area that it's challenged several times. That 50 area, if it can break out of the 50 area, I do think Delta sees all-time highs. I think you're looking at 70s, late 2025. I think, which makes sense with what we're seeing in the airline play. And then there's a lot of opportunity, obviously, with some of these beaten down names if they survive. You have Save, which is Spirit Airlines, which is sitting here in the low 4 or 5 area. If airlines do recover and Spirit recovers, I mean, this could end up making a nice common stock play. You had JetBlue previously was a name that people, kind of looked at in the 3 area. Some people bought it, some people didn't. And you can see it recovered back into the next area, which is going to be 7. If it can break free, I think, JetBlue can get up in the, 10 to 15 range eventually. But airlines are attractive. I just think from a trade perspective, a lot of stuff right now is at interesting levels. If you can get a cheap option play 3 months out, try it. I would probably play commons with a lot of these smaller airlines. Anyone else have any? Was if anyone's got anything, feel free, ping me, on Discord, send me a message. Happy to help. Any questions anyone has, feel free.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, nothing. Getting ready to try to make some money.
There you go. Well, if anyone has anything else, ping me in the chat, and again, happy to help, and then we can go from there.